I want to bring in now Democratic Senator Richard Blumenthal of Connecticut. Senator, great to have you back on the show. Thank you.
Wonderful to be here. Thanks for having me.
So as Garrett pointed out, the sort of last remaining degree of drama in any of this is whether any Democrats, frankly, will cross party lines. I have heard from my sources covering the White House this idea that they will tout a bipartisan acquittal, right, if any members of your party do cross over and vote with Republicans on, let's say, that second article of impeachment. Do you think that will happen? And are you prepared for how the White House will respond?
At this point, I will be very blunt and honest. I have no idea whether it will happen or not. I think each of us is focused on our own individual vote, as I am, because it is so historic. But I will say each of us will have to live with that vote. And the kind of process that we've had without witnesses, without documents, I hope will influence my colleagues to say there has been no full, fair proceeding. The elements of bribery have been proved. Bribery is an abuse of power. The president has obstructed this process. He tried to cheat, he got caught, and he worked hard to cover it up. And I think history will haunt any of my colleagues, particularly on the Republican side, who vote to acquit.
And to be clear, you're voting to convict, of course.
Well, I think the evidence is pretty compelling. I've laid it out. And I've said that the president, in effect, solicited a bribe. He solicited a personal benefit, foreign interference in the 2020 election, smearing a political opponent in return for releasing hundreds of millions of dollars in taxpayer-funded military assistance to an ally struggling to survive. That is classic bribery. Section 201 of 18 United States Code. And it was the same crime in the time of the founders as it is now. And so I think that abuse of power justifies a conviction.
Senator Joe Manchin is one of your colleagues who I don't think is where you are on this yet. I caught up with him yesterday for a quick interview outside the Capitol after his floor speech in which he called for a censure, basically reprimanding or admonishing President Trump. Is that something you could get behind?
I think at this point we need to focus on the task, historic challenge ahead, which is impeachment. That's the decision that we have to make. That's the only decition that we have between now and 4 o'clock tomorrow. And
are you ruling out then the possibility, Senator, that you would support a censure movement or a motion?
I rule nothing out if there is continued abuse of power, and that's what we unfortunately can expect. And I hope that the free press and the independent judiciary will continue the task of uncovering and sanctioning this president. We have a responsibility independently.
There's some new numbers out that are kind of interesting this morning, Senator. President Trump's approval rating and Gallup polling now hitting, frankly, what is, I think, an all-time high for him this administration. It's up 5 points since earlier this month. It's up to 49%. How do you look at that and say this impeachment process is not energizing his base, in a way giving him a boost?
We have a constitutional responsibility here. As you know, the House voted for impeachment, and our responsibility was to try the case. I think the House managers have done an extraordinarily professional job at it, and I believe the American people ultimately, not just his base, but all the American people will have to look at the proof that's been presented and also the evidence that's been concealed as part of this pattern of cover-up. And I don't think they'll look kindly at it.
Senator, before I let you go, I want to ask you about the other big headline of the morning. As a politician yourself, I know you have some interest likely in the political process playing out in Iowa. Your colleague, Senator Dick Durbin, called the Iowa caucuses a quaint and quirky tradition which should come to an end. Given everything you've seen unfold in these last 18 hours in Iowa, where are you? Do you agree with Senator Durbin? Should Iowa no longer be the first state that voters get to head to the caucuses for in an election year?
I think that Iowa, as presently done, has outlived its usefulness as the first state to cast its ballots and shape the future of the nomination process. I agree that it is a quaint process. Caucuses may or may not reflect the will of the people. The use of an app which was inaccessible, failed to download and upload, and ultimately proved very possibly that the downfall here is only a symptom of a process that needs reform.
Thank you for checking out our YouTube channel. Why don't you subscribe? It's really easy. Just click on that button down there. And for more news from MSNBC, click on any of these videos here for the latest interviews and highlights. You can get more videos from MSNBC with our newsletters. Head over to msnbc.com/newsletters to sign up.